Hello and welcome to the SDRealness podcast brought to you by SD Revolution, where we talk with sales development practitioners about their take on important topics in the space. I'm Alex Ellison, and here with me is my co-host, Grayson Fulbright.
Hey.
This month, we're focused on becoming a leader in the SDR role, and today's topic is about leading your peers as an SDR/team lead. Joining us today is Eddie Beqaj, hopefully I pronounced that name right, Senior Account Executive at Replayz. Eddie, thank you so much for hopping on with us.
You bet. You nailed the name. I don't know if anyone has got it that precisely on their first try, so well done. Happy to be here. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, I was practicing in the mirror this morning.
Well, I didn't get the chance. That's why I took it.
We do know that in sales, everything's about repetition and muscle memory. So your first step this morning was perfect.
Awesome. So to frame our conversation a bit, Eddie, I really want to get your take on what it really means to be a team lead as an SDR. You know, what are the responsibilities? What do they need to consider? What does it involve? And what does it actually look like to be successful when you do it?
Yeah, I mean, I think this is such an important topic, and we were talking about it offline earlier, but it's one of the toughest steps in your career, going from SDR to SDR team lead. I think the SDR position is one of the hardest, if not the hardest sales position out there to start with. But then going from being, on a team of your peers to managing them or leading them is challenging. And I think that, to set yourself up for success, there's a few things that you really, really need to focus on. And I would say that number one is staying organized. So we know that, the SDR handoff to the AE is critical and crucial. So you got to be a CRM wizard. You went from putting all your data into the CRM, and now you're responsible for making sure that it's all up to date and having all of your reps, make that handoff as smooth as possible. Number two is investing in yourself outside of work. So this is probably your first managerial role, if you want to call it that, your leadership role. So where are you learning from that? So I think you got to, read leadership books. There's hundreds of thousands out there, and you can talk to anyone in the industry and they'll tell you which ones you should get on. Listen to podcasts. There's no right way in making this step. It's all about taking it as you can. And I think that the more research you do, the more opinions you take in, the better off you'll be. And then my third point would be, your peers are now, you're now managing your peers. And I think that creating that candidness and openness with them and understanding exactly, how you guys work from here going forward is critical. So I would say, in your first week, start one-on-ones with all your peers and get to know them. And then also your direct reports now. Just talk to them, be open, be candid, and really understand and build that trust and, build your relationship from what it was to what it's going to be.
Yeah, I love that. And I really think the one-on-one and setting those up with each individual team member you have is one of the biggest things you can do as a team lead. I mean, every relationship you have with each of those people is different. And so each one of them is going to change differently. So I think that's a really good way to keep track of how you're sort of making that transition from friend and from peer to manager and leader of these people. And without that sort of one-on-one feedback and open, candid conversation, it's hard to succeed in the role like that.
Yeah, and I think it's just about keeping those communication lines open, right? Being like, hey, like an open door policy, come in, chat with me whenever you need to. I'm here to help you. I'm here to support you. We succeed as a team when we all succeed together. So whether you're an individual contributor, at the end of the day, it's a team game, right? I believe that sales and sports are so similar, and you learn so much from being on a sports team that transitions over to the boardroom, if you want to call it that. And those qualities and characteristics stay true throughout your sales career, but specifically when you're in that SDR role.
Yeah, for sure. To point this in sort of a different direction, those were some awesome takes on and tips on what team leads can do when they're moving into the role and how they can gain, these different leadership skills that they're going to need moving forward. What are some of the common mistakes that you see these SDR team lead hybrid roles making when they move into the role if they don't exactly know what they're doing?
Yeah, and you know what? It's not their fault, right? We know that 68% of managers have been individual contributors, have never had leadership experience. So, and a lot of these people don't necessarily want to be a manager. So they kind of get thrown into this role and they're kind of, swimming upstream, if you will. So, at Replayz, we know that 46% of reps are getting less than 1 hour of call coaching per month. And that's a problem. So, going back to my sports analogy, if you only, if your coach is only coaching you 50% of the time per month, you're probably not going to win many games. So I think that one of the biggest common, mistakes that gets made early is that you're not reviewing your team's calls and emails. I was talking to Michael Tuso from Chili Piper the other day, and he brought up call scoring and email scoring. And, that's so important to understand where you sit as an organization and where you can, build on your successes and learn from your failures. So I think that, being able to find time to coach is so important. But then how do you coach? Like, what do you coach to? And so then that's where I think that you need to learn, internal relations with your company, but also look outside for, coaching companies that are out there, places where you can go and find more information. Like there's tons of sales training available, but it's specific to what you are coaching to. And I think that's where people get lost. There's Sandler, there's Challenger, there's Miller Hyman, there's great sales training out there, but how do you bring it back and find, those values in which you're going to coach to? So I think that, for a new team lead, you got to have those coaching calls and you can't push them, and use, your manager and understand how they do it or how they've done it and kind of, build off that relationship as well. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. And I really love this idea that you put out of, a lot of times people get put in positions of leadership without necessarily wanting or having the skills for it. And I think that's a natural progression too of just the sales career path. You get put on the front lines and the whole goal is to move to be a team lead, eventually a closer, and then, moving on to become a manager of a sales team or maybe a vice president down the line. And, along the way, leadership kind of gets expected of those people, but not necessarily like driven into their training, driven into, their organizational resources and how they level up. And I think that's especially true for SDR teams, because these are generally entry-level reps that, are just now sharpening and mastering those sales skills. And then as soon as they sharpen and master them, they kind of get put into this pressured position of like, okay, you've got the skills. Now let's see if you can actually like duplicate that to your team members, and not only existing team members that you've known, but then the new ones that pop up and people who might be less or more skilled than you at different things. So to kind of back up into some like general tips for someone who is, let's say they've just become a team lead. They've got enough skills to where we can expect them to be able to know what to do. How can they help navigate that kind of peer relationship when things might be tense, whether it be a more experienced rep, maybe someone who's new and might have some challenges with training that, a team lead might not be prepared for? What's some advice that you can give for that?
Yeah, so I think that there's two points that you hit on there. I'm a big fan of learning via osmosis. So, utilizing the people around you in your organization that have done it before you, and kind of using them as a mentor-mentee relationship. Listen, you just hit it on the head, Grayson. A lot of these people aren't prepared for this next step in their career, right? They, like you said, they're crushing quota, they're hammering out SDR calls, and all of a sudden they're tapping the shoulder to say, hey, now you got to run it. It's like, whoa, well, I don't have any experience doing that. So I think that, using people in and outside your organization that you can kind of call and depend on to say, hey, like I have this, guy who is a couple years older than me and he's got 2 years more of experience than me, but I got the team lead role over him and he's kind of, holding a grudge or whatnot. How do you deal with that? So I think that, talking to your peers in the industry is huge to help with that. And then secondly, you touched on training and, being a call coaching software that Replayz is, we know that people leave companies for two reasons. One, they're not supported in career development, or two, they're not motivated. So if, you're not motivating your team, you got to look in the mirror and figure out a way to do it. And two, how do you support them in career development? Well, it's getting them to that next level. And you have those candid conversations. Do you want to be a SDR team lead? Is that your next goal? Because a lot of people don't. Like I said earlier, a lot of people would happily be individual contributors for the rest of their life. And that's great. Like we need individual contributors just as much as we need VPs of sales. And to be honest, in the SaaS tech world right now, the average length of a VP of sales is 18 months. So I'm not sure that's, for everybody that wants to, kind of jump into that world. Whereas you could be a rockstar AE for 10 years at a company and just, crush quota, crush your calls. So I think it's really about finding out what your team wants and where they see their career going. And a lot of the time they're not going to know, right? They're 1 or 2 years into their SDR role. They don't have enough experience or exposure across the board to really understand. So then it's giving them that ability to kind of test the waters or get a little taste of coaching or a little taste of leadership and see how they like it. And maybe they don't, maybe they do. But at that point, you actually have a better idea of where they want to go with their career. I know that was a long-winded answer for a simple question, but that's what came to mind.
No, I think that was a really good answer as it was. So I appreciate it. I think that was an interesting point you make where it's sort of assumed that people want to follow this SDR to team lead to AE to whatever trajectory. And yeah, you're right. That's just not the case, right? Like I think one of the things when I was an SDR, the company I was at had just started sort of putting in these roles to say like, hey, maybe we should ask if you actually want to be a team lead before we just say, oh, you're like the most senior on the project. You do well as an SDR. Here you go. Here's the role. And I think that was a huge transition for the company to make because it said that they recognized there was talent to be team leads, but also talent that wanted to go in another direction within the company. And so it really allowed them to take those people that didn't want to be a team lead and see where else they could fit in within the organization down the road, things like that.
Yeah. And I've seen it at a bunch of companies I've worked at, even changing departments. Like I've seen SDRs come in and realize that, hey, I don't want to pound the phones all day, or I don't want to send these emails, but the product team looks really cool. And so they transition over to the product team. You hire for certain qualities when you're hiring for sales positions or any position for that matter. But I believe that culture and fit is number one. So if you get a person in your organization that fits your culture and fits the way you guys do business, then you're going to find a place for them to be, whether that is, moving up as an individual contributor into leadership or into another entirely different segment of the business.
Yeah, I totally agree. And so I wanted to close us out, Eddie, with a final question, because I know that, you have experience in sales development. You're currently an AE that also does, your own prospecting, which I think is just so impressive, and kudos to that. You've gone through a lot of these steps that I think, people who are new reps or maybe SDRs that are starting to step up into that team lead role, I think a lot of people might be able to look up to where you're at and gain some knowledge and some tips on how they can improve things, how they can do it better, faster, and while, creating positive experiences for all the people and relationships that they build. So to close this out, because I know you're such a unique person for this, what are some top tips you would leave for an SDR who just got that team lead position and is expected to kind of run with it and make it successful?
Yeah, I mean, it's a great question. And I am in a unique position because, going back, I've been in startups for the last 7 years, but now it's a startup with just my boss and myself. So prospecting falls on me. I feel like I wear an SDR hat, an AE hat, and a leadership hat all in one, which is awesome. That's why I took the role. But I think that, my advice to people that are in that role right now or looking to get into that team lead role is, one, find a mentor. Find someone that you can look up to, that you can call, that you can, utilize at your disposal to help you get to where you want to be. Two would be, really invest in yourself. Find the time to invest in what you want out of what you're doing. A lot of people build their brand on LinkedIn. A lot of people are massive, like I said earlier, readers or podcast listeners, but kind of, take it all in and be a sponge and then find your own path through all the knowledge that you learned. And I mean, three is just, be yourself and don't be afraid to fail. Someone told me once that if you have a 20% close rate, that means 80% of your days are going to be terrible. I don't really like that. I think that you got to find happiness in that 20%. And if you get it to 22% or 25%, like that's a win. You're going to get hung up on, you're going to get emails, telling you to F off or what have you. So be prepared to, feel uncomfortable and don't be afraid to fail. You're going to make mistakes, and that's only part of growing. So I would say, that's the biggest tip I can give and leave with you guys here.
Yeah, I love it. And I mean, to continue your sports analogies from earlier, it's like baseball. If you bat 300 consistently, you can easily make the Hall of Fame.
Totally. You're going to be a multimillionaire if you can bat 300, 3 out of 10. So yeah. If you hit 3 out of 10 in sales, it's a similar ball game. And those guys don't have a bad life, I would say.
Not at all. Awesome. Well, thank you so much for joining us today, Eddie, talking about being a leader in the team lead position. for people listening or watching, where can they find out more about you as a person and also about Replayz as a company?
Yeah, I was just mentioning my LinkedIn brand. I've been trying to level up my game. I definitely don't want to be a LinkedIn influencer, as I call them, but just trying to provide value back. So you can find me on LinkedIn, Eddie Beqaj, Beqaj, or you can check out Replayz, and we're all over our website and our LinkedIn as well there.
Awesome. Sounds good. Well, thanks so much, Eddie. This has been Alex and Grayson for the SDRealness podcast. Until next time, SDRs, keep it real.
Thanks, guys.